Oh, I get to start, don't I?
Yep.
Thanks for joining another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Scott Warr.
And I'm Don Freeman. And today we're going to talk about the intersection of metabolic flexibility and endurance running. We're thrilled to have Dr. Latt Mansor, a leading expert in metabolism and fueling, joining us to unravel how metabolism and fueling affect our performance and our health. Dr. Mansor will help us understand the metabolic systems and requirements as endurance athletes and the types of fuel that we use for our bodies. We'll explore the strategic timing of those fuel sources and how they may help our performance and health.
Hey, thanks for joining us, Dr. Latt. If you don't know, or if you haven't heard him on any of the podcasts, boy, he's out there all over the place. In fact, he actually runs his own podcast, which is the hvmn, which stands for Health Via Modern Nutrition Podcast. Go out. He has a lot of really good interviews there. And he's been on a lot of other podcasts also. He holds a PhD in physiology, anatomy, and genetics from the University of Oxford, where his research focused on metabolism of type 2 diabetic heart in hypoxia. And we're going to talk about some of those terms a little bit later. He also holds an MA from Columbia University and a Bachelor of Science from University of Nottingham in biotechnology. Sorry, I almost gave you an honorary degree you didn't earn. He's a world expert in physiology and metabolism and consults with elite sports, military, clinical, and research organizations. Dr. Latt, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for the shout out. Thank you very much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here talking with you guys.
Hey, and Dr. Latt, I've had this question reserved for a long time, and finally we have the right guest for me to ask it. And I want to talk about metabolic flexibility and the body's ability to take different fuel sources and make good of it. Can you explain to us what the term metabolic flexibility means to you?
Sure. So metabolism. Let's start with metabolism 101, right?
Okay.
Metabolism consists of anabolism and catabolism. And those two terms are basically building, anabolism, and catabolism is breaking down. So it's a concept, it's a process of constantly building up and breaking down within the body. And that's all to create energy and optimize substrate utilization. And when I talk about substrates, I'm talking about the macronutrients. So fats, proteins, glucose or carbs, and now we have ketones. So ketones is supposedly categorized as a macronutrient as well because of the quantity that we need to take and the quantity that it affects the body. So when we come to metabolic flexibility, when we're talking about metabolic flexibility, it's essentially the ability of your body to be able to utilize different fuels at different times given the specific circumstances. If you're sprinting, your body should be able to burn more sugar or carbs versus fats. And when you're running an endurance race, you want to be able to tap into that fat storage more readily compared to burning sugar, because sugar, the first part of sugar metabolism is glycolysis. Glycolysis works independent of oxygen. So it's an indispensable pathway when it comes to anaerobic exercise. So when we're talking about high intensity sprints and big lifts, CrossFit, we're looking at upregulating glycolytic rates. So when you have that fast energy and then you produce, when people talk about lactic acid, the byproduct of glycolysis is lactic acid, which will then get shuttled into the Krebs cycle, into mitochondria, go through the electron transport chain and creates ATP. And ATP is the currency of energy within the cell. So metabolic flexibility goes back to the response, the signaling and response of the body to be able to switch on and off these different switches to use different substrates at a given circumstance.
That was a very, very simple explanation of a complicated process, and I appreciate that. It actually makes sense to me as you describe it. As endurance athletes, which is the community and the audience that we're talking with today, we've talked a lot over the years about adapting our bodies to be more fat adapted, being able to burn more fat when we are out exercising, so that, initially when you raise your heart rate, like you said, we go into this glucose or process where we're burning our glycogen stores, which are limited, by the way. And if we can tap into or make our bodies adapt so that we're burning more fat or a higher percentage of fat during these endurance events, then we can go longer and be more successful. Um, how does that work in this whole metabolic flexibility stage?
Sure. One good point that you pointed out was the limitedness of glycogen. So to put it into perspective, an average body will keep, a maximum of around 2,000 calories worth of glycogen. But when you're talking about your fat storage, someone can range between like 20,000 to 40,000 calories worth of energy. So that's why when you are going on to an endurance race, you want to be able to tap into that bigger storage, because that 2,000 calories of glycogen will not last you long if you're not able to switch over. So this is where this metabolic flexibility becomes so important, because as your heart rate increases or decreases, or as your body goes through these motions, you want to be able to train your body to recognize what is the most optimal source of fuel during that activity. So I'm sure you guys are used to the term cardio zone 2, when people use cardio zone 2 to adapt to fat metabolism more, so that you are keeping your heart rate low, but hopefully you are also increasing your intensity, but also being able to keep your heart rate low within the cardio zone 2, meaning that you can go further and faster, but still tapping into your fat storage.
Dr. Latt, you said something in your first explanation there that I want to come back to. I don't know. Don has a medical background, so he understands this stuff a lot better than I do. You mentioned that when we go through this, and I can't remember the exact word, the glycolysis, glycolysis process, that it doesn't require oxygen. When we're converting fat, it does require oxygen. Is that, can I infer that? And can you expound on that?
So if you look at it, if you think about a Y shape, so the one top end is glucose, the other top end is fat. It all converges down into the Krebs cycle. So they get metabolized to a point where they produce acetyl-CoA, which is the common substrate that goes into Krebs cycle, and then it gets circulated within the intermediaries, and then creates all these NAD, NADH to go into the electron transport chain to produce ATP. Now, the first part of glycolysis, because it happens so quickly, and it is oxygen independent. So from glucose, multiple steps all the way to acetyl-CoA, there is no oxygen needed. But for fats going through beta oxidation, you will go through that and then go down the electron transport chain, and then the end receiver of the electrons would be oxygen. So the mitochondria uses oxygen to create water. So that's the end product together with ATP. So you produce ATP and then you release water. Okay. So in order for the body to create enough amount of energy, you will need to go through the ETC, the electron transport chain. But because you are talking about high intensity and anaerobic exercise, it only lasts a while. And you can only last a while, because that glycolysis will not be able to sustain the energy demand long term, right? That's when we go winded and we get all this lactic acid buildup, and it hurts because of that. And then all this lactic acid is essentially borrowed energy, and they'll go back down and get converted into acetyl-CoA, go back into the mitochondria and create more ATP that way. So the main mechanism of ATP creation or energy creation is in the mitochondria. Glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm, which is outside of mitochondria, but that creates fast energy when we need to. So fight or flight sort of reaction, and you need to like sprint for your life, and That's where we evolved into.
Now, I remember when I was in school, there was a couple of sections of class. First, we went to the lecture and we combed through the books and we learned all of this stuff. And then we went to my favorite spot, the lab, where we put some of this into practice. So can we take this knowledge that you just shared with us and bring it to the trail? Can we train our bodies to be better fat burners and fat adapted? Are we on a foolish chase to do that, or is it possible?
It is absolutely possible. I think genetic definitely plays a role here, because some people are just better fat burners, and some people just need carbs and they react to carbs better. Now, it is not one or the other. It is always a flux, a balance between fat and carbs and different substrates in your body, especially when you're talking about athletes and exercise. So if you, like I said earlier, if you look at cardio zone 2, it's a very popular way to train people to be fat adapted, because your heart rate is low enough that you don't need to go into the anaerobic threshold. So it's not signaling your body to increase glycolysis. So it's slowly going through the whole process of Krebs cycle and ATC, and then the whole process of creating ATP via mitochondria, in which case they'll start tapping into the fat storage. Right. So that is a very good way of training your body to be fat adapted. And over time, as you are more fat adapted and as you increase your fitness level, you'll be able to go further and faster without increasing your heart rate. I think that's also a big telltale why endurance athletes have very low resting heart rate. And, they always can go, much faster with a lower heart rate, because they're just so fat adapted and fit that way. And then on the other hand, let's look at a disease population, say diabetic people or insulin resistance people. We have seen again and again in studies that exercise actually reverse insulin resistance. It increases insulin sensitivity. When you exercise, the muscle cells especially increases insulin sensitivity, which means it upregulates the insulin receptors so that they can accept insulin better, and therefore create the whole cascade of event to pull those glucose in to the muscles to be metabolized, because the muscles need energy now. So your body is telling the muscles and say, hey, I'm working out now, I need source of energy, and we have plenty of glucose going around in the blood. Let's upregulate a mechanism where we can pull this glucose in and create energy from it.
That's fascinating, and we've talked about fats and carbs, or fats and glucose, a lot on this podcast. Let's get into some other fuels. So, what about protein? How does protein work as a fuel for athletes?
So, protein is very unique in a way that, yes, it can be metabolized to create energy, but the body will always deprioritize metabolizing proteins. The reason being, fats and sugar are just so much better as fuels, and proteins are much better as building blocks for different molecules within the body, enzymes, hormones, different intermediaries. They need these amino acids as building blocks. So they will keep the proteins as much as possible. When I say they, I mean the body will keep your proteins as much as possible before breaking it down. So they will always choose to break down fats and glucose. So, they will burn glucose first generally, and then go into fats as you increase your activity. And then if you're really starving yourself a week long, whatnot, and then they'll start breaking down proteins and from amino acids and turn that into ATP. So that's why when people talk about macronutrient or source of fuel, it's always fats and carbs, even though for a fact that protein is also a macronutrient and it is also capable of creating energy.
So I understand that the proteins are the building blocks for the body, and we shouldn't waste those on fuel when there are other sources around, right? Just to simplify things. So with that said, should we even take in any protein before a run? Is it useless? Is it kind of bogging us down because it's really not used to rebuild the body at the time, and we're looking to fuel ourselves up? So before the run meal or a long endurance event, would you recommend putting in a protein?
I think a lot of studies point towards protein better for recovery. I think protein for recovery has been more of a gold standard practice, whereas pre-workout, some people, if they are going to have a big meal, the day before, carb loading like pasta, they'll have meatballs, it's fine, right? But I don't think like going out of your way to have protein before workout would make that much of a difference. But then again, I'm not a nutritionist per se, so that specific case, I don't think it will add that much value. And I think that's also why a lot of pre-workouts, they don't have protein. If in any case people take protein during workout or intra-workout, they would take BCAA, because some studies show that the branch chain amino acid may be helpful during workout itself, especially if you're doing weightlifting workouts, to help incorporate that the proteins, the amino acids into your muscles almost like immediately when it's being stressed.
So we talked a little bit about, to protein or not to protein before a long run. And I know one of the things that has been talked about, we've practiced, and I hope that I didn't miss it in a previous comment that you made. If I want to become fat adapted, should I run fasted and train my body to be that fat adapted runner? Or am I better off, trickling a bit of carbohydrate and then starting the run?
I think that has been an ongoing debate forever, right? And
we're hoping to settle it right now with you, doctor.
I think there are a lot of notions that people should go fasted, should run fasted, because then your glycogen is already depleted overnight, during the overnight fast. So you have no other sources except for the fats. Now, the different workout that you're doing also makes the difference, right? If you're doing fasted workout, but if you're doing anaerobic exercise, your body, by hook or by crook, will also create glucose via a process called gluconeogenesis. So you are still running on sugar if you're doing anaerobic exercise. So if you're doing fasted exercise, and if you're doing like just slow, steady cardio, where you allow your body to adapt to that fat metabolism, then you are training your body to work out fats. Now, once it gets really complicated, once you factor in genetic factors, you factor in hormonal balance, because some people react to a little bit of carbs a little bit better. So they get more energy, that they get that boost of mental clarity or whatever, and it switches their metabolism on, for the lack of a more scientific term, and then they start burning their fats. So some people, they have their insulin levels like, out of whack. They need the glucose to like jump it up, or it really becomes complicated if you just take into consideration all the different individualistic values, all the characteristics between individuals.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I love that you brought up the topic of how genetics plays into this. We're all different, and we're all going to react differently. We know, there's a great athlete in our community, Michael McKnight, who's done a 100-mile run fasted, and really taps into his fat stores to be able to do that. And there's a lot of examples like that out there. And if we're trying to emulate that, we may have completely different genetics that may not allow us to do that. And we need to learn how our own individual bodies, we need to do the experiment of one, take some scientific principles, apply them, and see how our experiment of one works for those principles.
Absolutely. I mean, the training will be different, the nutrition would be different, the recovery would be different, and even your adaptation to the surrounding would be different. Like you would completely, some people are better at hot weather, like running in hot weather, and some people are just doing much better in colder weather.
Mm-hmm. So the other thing that I want to just touch on before we get into additional types of fuel, which is the thing that I'm excited to talk about, is, and I just drew a blank.
Well, while you think of that, I did have a question pending that I'll ask and allow you to think of yours. I remember from way back when, and I'm not going to say how long ago, but tell me if there's any truth to this, that some caffeine is what is helpful at starting that process of burning fat and converting fat into fuel. Is there any truth to that? That small cup of coffee or what you have to help you get going?
Yes, there are studies that showed ergogenic effect of caffeine. I believe the dose is around like 250, 300 milligrams, so quite a high dose as well for ergogenic, for like, performance, as far as performance goes. Now, caffeine is also a stimulant. So if you think about stimulant, what caffeine does, it does increase your heart rate, it increases your blood pressure, right? It increases your general physiological processes. As a result, but do remember that caffeine does not provide the body with the energy it needs. So it increases the rate of activities, the rate of processes, but you still have to get energy from within the body. So that's when, what you said about it kickstarts the usage of different substrates. Yes, it still has to pull substrates from within your body in order to meet the demand that the caffeine has kicked up.
So interesting. It sounds like there's some validity to that kickstart first thing in the morning. But what about midway through a run, through the event? Would there be any advantage, or are you already kickstarted and no sense of piling on?
I mean, again, I think caffeine it's an adenosine like receptor. It stops you from feeling fatigued. So to that point, it may stop you from feeling fatigued faster.
Good point.
So it depends on, like, I personally, I don't drink coffee. I can take tea, so not a very high amount of caffeine. Otherwise, I get headaches. So I don't particularly use caffeine to boost my performance or anything. But I can totally see the use of caffeine from a fatigue prevention point of view.
To Scott's point, to Scott's point, an experiment of one. If it works for you, then you should do it. And if it doesn't, then just don't.
Correct.
Yeah. I do remember my question now.
Yes.
Good.
I was thinking the body has multiple systems, right?
Yes.
Multiple muscle groups, multiple organs. And I think in my simple mind, some of those are prioritized over others. So my little toe, the muscle in my little toe, the priority of it getting energy is very, very low versus my heart, right? That's a muscle and its priority is probably extremely high. Do these systems, these muscular systems that have these mitochondria cells in them, do they utilize different fuels differently?
Yes. Different organs use different fuels differently. So for the heart, a normal healthy heart actually burns about 70 to 75% of the energy comes from fat, and about 25% from glucose. But when you are in hypoxic environment or low oxygen environment, like high altitude, or if you're doing exercise, it switches over more towards glucose because of what we talked about earlier on glycolysis. And then because of the emergence of exogenous ketones, I know you guys are going to ask me this question later, but since we're talking about the different substrates that different organs are using, exogenous ketones allowed a lot of studies to observe, with the presence of glucose, fats, and proteins, and then add ketones on it, what would the heart choose? And the heart uptakes ketones preferentially when it's available. So they saw an uptake of ketones when it's proportional to the availability and independent of the uptake of the other substrates, meaning that it doesn't slow down the fat metabolism or slow down glucose metabolism. In fact, it takes up ketones on top of what they're already doing. So it's providing more energy for the heart, and that could be said to the brain as well, and brain especially.
So let's actually thank you for bringing that up. Let's actually open the box. Don, you're raising your hand. I can barely see.
Oh, before you say that, and we're jumping into the next topic. When you said, I have a very simple idea of the body, and what entered my mind was this cartoon figured body with gears and levers, some pulleys, and maybe some fire to make heat to make it all go. That's what I thought you had an impression of how simple your explanation was. But that was a great question you asked. I thought, you know what? Scott doesn't have that simplistic view. That was a good question. Well done.
I think Netflix had this anime called, was it Cell? It was Cell, wasn't it? It's basically an anime that's just purely based on the human physiology, and they depict the red blood cells and the white blood cells as characters, and it's the whole ecosystem within the body. Then they'll have the workers, they have different functions, and essentially that we are just one big ecosystem for the microorganisms within our gut, with underneath our skin, and also our cells themselves.
And it doesn't
need
need
to look that up.
It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. You can make good decisions for yourself and to extend your life by just having that kind of view. So that serves us well, Scott. That's good.
Yes. So Cells at Work.
Cells at Work. I'll have to look that up. You say that's on Netflix?
It was on. I don't know if it's on anymore. It's like a couple of years back.
Okay, we'll have to look that up. So, Dr. Latt, let's get into this other fuel source. And if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably heard about ketosis. You've probably heard about ketones. But there's a lot of information out there, and I would guess that there's some good science-based information, and there's probably some crap. Let's get frank. There's probably some crap out there. Talk to us about this fourth fuel source, and I'm including protein in there, but
Yes.
we said that that's probably not the best type of fuel. Let's talk about ketones. Is it something that our body makes naturally? And then let's get into the exogenous ketones and that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. Ketones are indeed molecules that our bodies naturally produce, and it is produced under specific conditions. And those conditions are, you have to be very low on glucose and very low on glycogen storage. And the only way to produce that in the modern day society is via fasting or a ketogenic diet. So in a ketogenic diet, you restrict your carbohydrate intakes severely. And when you're fasting, you're just not eating, and therefore your glycogen will go really low, as your body will burn your glycogen first when you just go about your day. And then your liver will start converting fats into ketones. And the reason why it does that, even though we know that fat is a good source of energy, a good source of fuel, why does the body need to convert it into ketones? The reason being, the whole reason is because of the blood-brain barrier. There is a barrier that stops bigger molecules to enter the brain. So fats actually can't enter the brain because of its large size. So if the brain is not using glucose because you're low on glucose and fats cannot get through, what are the different energy sources? You can use lactate in there, but even then, without glucose, you can't produce any more lactate. So you need smaller molecules that can work very well to bypass the blood-brain barrier and produce energy. Ketones is the answer. So the body produces ketone in order to bypass the barrier, reach the brain, and create energy for the brain. Now, this, if you think about from an evolutionary point of view, people in hunting days, they will go through feast and famine cycle, and when they finish their food, they'll go through hunger, and that's when they go out and hunt. But obviously, we evolved to the point where you won't just get all fatigued and pass out when you're hungry. Instead, you still need the energy and focus and alertness in order to hunt. And that's what ketone does to you. When the brain is on ketones, you are on high alert, you get your mental focus, and you get that sense of energy. And a lot of people who have done fasting or done a ketogenic diet, they feel the difference. They feel, when people say, do you feel like you're in ketosis? That's the feeling, the subjective feel that they feel, which is the mental clarity and the focus that that we talked about earlier. And that's why I use exogenous ketones every time before I go on a podcast. So through technology, we are now able to increase our blood ketone levels without being on a restrictive diet. So it's essentially a source of ketone supplementation that you can directly drink and increase your blood ketone levels.
So evolutionarily, I love your example. We still got to be mentally clear, even though we're depleted, because we still need to go out and find out where those animals are, or the plants, or whatever we're going after, to provide fuel. My question is, we've needed these ketones since the very beginning of when our bodies started to metabolize them, right? Only recently have we, at least in my history, have I been aware of exogenous ketones. And exogenous means that they're manufactured outside their body, or synthetically. Why is that? Why haven't we, back in the 1800s, figured out, hey, there's this stuff called ketones, and boy, if we could introduce those from an outside source, rather than going through this ketosis process, boy, that sure would be a benefit.
Well, if you think about just ketones on its own, ketogenic diet has been used to treat epilepsy for more than 100 years. So it has been known to treat epilepsy and to be beneficial to a certain degree on an overexcited brain. But as far as exogenous ketone is concerned, like, nobody actually thought of ketone as a supplement, because they're like, okay, either you do the diet, you get into ketosis, and you get the whole change of metabolism within your body and get the benefit out of it, or it could very well just be a byproduct of a lot of people. They identify, when they search ketosis or when they search ketones, the first thing they saw online, at least a few years back, was still ketoacidosis, which is a very different condition. It's a condition that's associated with diabetic patients, where they have very high level of sugar, but your body is still starving because it's so insulin resistant that it's not taking in the sugar, that it starts creating ketones on top of your high sugar level. And that is when your body becomes that's when it's increasing your risk, and it can cause death. So ketoacidosis is completely different, but that gave a bad name to ketones because it's a byproduct of a disease. And because of our modern society and industrialization of food as well, the abundance of carbohydrates, we almost never spend any time in ketosis, because we are always having our insulin high, and that prevents ketogenesis in the liver. I think it started about 20 years ago. DARPA funded a project, Metabolic Dominance, with NIH, to create a fuel for long and demanding journeys for military and operators. And that was when they started experimenting and looking at the possibility of exogenous ketone. Because, hey, if this is good for the brain, if this is another source of fuel apart from fats and glucose, what if we give this on top of their existing diet and existing nutrition? Would that increase their performance? So it has been going on for 30 years now, I think. But for the first exogenous ketone that has hit the market was Ketone Esters, that was brought by hvmn. That was in 2017. So that was only 6 years ago. Whereas before that, I know that ketone salts were out before, but ketone salts does not raise your blood ketone levels high enough to have a significant effect on performance.
Can you, and I don't expect you to know this, but can you roll back some history back there where DARPA came up with this or helped fund it? What was some of the early scientific discoveries or findings, or what pushed this from concept to reality, where these military athletes are out there using it? Do you know any history about that?
If you look at if you Google Dr. Richard Veech, he has already passed away a couple of years ago. He worked for the NIH, and he was part of the DARPA project, and looked extensively into exogenous ketones, ketone esters specifically. And in 2015, I believe, they published a paper with the University of Oxford looking at cell metabolism in Cell Metabolism journal, looking at the effect of ketone esters on endurance on cyclists, and they saw an improvement in performance. And that was the turning point where at that point it was still not commercialized. It was still just a prototype that people just experiment in the lab. And that was when it's like, hey, like this could be a thing. Like let's make it into a commercial product. Let's get it into hands of more people. Let's get more studies going and really understand the mechanistic processes at which these ketones are improving performance.
And we spoke to Mark Cucuzella about this, one of the what we call him our trail doctor, and he made a distinction between ketone esters and ketone salts. Can you help get us up to speed on that?
So as I said earlier, ketones, our bodies provide our bodies produce ketones naturally. The three main forms of ketones that our bodies produce are BHB, beta hydroxybutyrate, acetone, and acetoacetate. Beta hydroxybutyrate, BHB, is the main form that our bodies use for metabolism. So whenever you prick your finger to test your blood ketone levels, that's usually blood BHB level. And a lot of products outside now, it's using BHB as the backbone because it's ketone. So ketone salt is essentially BHB bound with any salt like sodium, potassium, magnesium. Ketone ester is BHB bound with butanediol. Butanediol is another molecule that enters your body, goes to your liver, and gets converted into BHB. And then over time, we got more types of ketone esters. So that the type that I just mentioned was ketone monoester, so it's a single bond. And then now you have ketone diester. You have two bonds. You have like C6 and bound with butanediol. You have acetoacetate and bound with butanediol. Then we realized these ketone esters managed to raise blood BHB level much higher than ketone salts. So we started looking at ketone esters. And then we realized on top of that, all these ketone esters, the backbone of it is not BHB. The backbone of all these ketone esters is butanediol. All of these are bound to butanediol. So our Ketone IQ is actually using pure R-butanediol as an active ingredient. It goes to your liver, gets converted 100% into BHB and released into your blood and increases your BHB at a much subtler level.
Boy, that's fascinating. I in my real life, I work in agriculture with agronomists, and there's a philosophy called the 4 R's of nutrient management for plants, right? And I want to get into those. I think that they would equally translate into what we're talking about today. Those 4 R's are the rights. We call the rights: the right source, the right timing, the right placement, and the right amount, right rate. So let's talk about that for a minute as we're talking about all these different sources, macronutrients, and sources of fuel. What is the right source for endurance athletes? We want to go out on a run this afternoon. What sources of energy should I be using? Should I be trickling in all of them? Should I be focused on some of them or one of them? And then let's translate that into the recovery process.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Great question. I think even if the funny thing about our body is that it will prioritize, it will optimize no matter what. So even if you provide all of them into your body will ultimately choose whatever it wants to choose.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's a miracle.
Yeah, because if you have carbs, proteins, and fats in your body, you go work out, and then you measure your oxidation rate. Your oxidation rate of carbs and fats and proteins would be different to Don, for example. And that's how our bodies work, right? So for an endurance athlete in general, you want to be able to tap into your fat storage. Of course, you want to be able to metabolize fat effectively. But before you even get there, your body will use the glycogen stores. That's why a lot of people do carb feeding, carb loading before, because you want to load up that glycogen so that you can last longer, because you have two tanks. You have the tank of glycogen, you have the tank of fat storage, right? And then you add ketones into the mix. What we have seen is that during the run, ketones actually has a glycogen sparing effect. People who are on ketones, their glycogen stores last longer than those who are not on ketones.
Interesting.
And then on top of that, you get the mental clarity part. So you get the mental focus on top of the physiological benefit. Now people are in it to win it.
So I don't mean to interrupt you, Scott, because I had a feeling you were about to make a comment.
No. Yeah, and it also saves you from having to do a restrictive diet, because not many people can go on to that diet and burn on just fat and ketones. Some people still need the glycogen stores. So this gives you the flexibility to choose, as well as giving your body the flexibility to choose whatever fuel that is most optimal. So it comes back to metabolic flexibility.
You know, we've all been, all of us that have run some of these endurance events have found times when we kind of joke about it, that our mental clarity kind of gets foggy, and we're trying to figure out and do simple math. I have 6 more miles to the next aid station. How long is it going to take me at this pace versus this pace? And we're trying to figure that out, and we have all our fingers out, and we're trying to do math on our fingers, and our brain isn't working. It sounds like this is a perfect example of where ketones, if supplemented during the run, can keep your mind sharp and clear so that you don't get that fogginess. I'm curious. You're nodding, so I think that I'm right on that, and you can confirm that audibly here in just a minute. But I also want to get back to the other systems, muscular systems, that ketones work efficiently in. You mentioned the heart, and I think there's some others that I've heard you talk about on other podcasts. Talk to us about how ketones help the brain, help the heart, and some of maybe the other organs that endurance athletes need while they're out doing a long training run or a long race.
Right. Yeah. So one great thing that you pointed out is, when math is not mathing when you're running, right? and you need that mental clarity. A big part of our customer base are athletes, endurance or cyclists, or even snow sports now. But another big part of the customer base is also, we call it knowledge workers. So executives, or people who need to, be very productive at work, even students who take it for exams, presentations, and all that. So it shows the effect of Ketone IQ on the brain per se. There are studies that use either ketogenic diet or ketone ester and show the presence of ketones in the body actually increases the interaction between brain regions. So they call it brain network stability. There's a paper published, I believe, in 2022. The presence of ketones alone can induce a increased brain network stability, which is associated, the decrease of it is associated with dementia and neurodegenerative diseases. So we know that the brain not only preferentially will take up ketones, it is also increasing the activity of the brain and increasing the focus of whatever activity you're doing. So as far as the heart goes, there are papers published that showed in heart attacks. So when you have a myocardial infarction or heart attack, after that, even if they survive, the heart goes into compensatory mode and it goes into hypertrophy, because some cells will be dead. It needs more energy to pump blood throughout the body, so it enlarges. When they talk about enlarged heart, it's very risky. It's a very high risk in developing heart failure. So when they put ketones in, the hypertrophy and the damage post myocardial infarction was mitigated. So that has shown, it basically shows the efficiency of ketone as a fuel. So there is one study in 1995 by Sato that showed that per molecule of oxygen used, ketone is more efficient than glucose even when it comes to energy production. So when you think about all these diseases that is caused by the deficiency of substrate or the deficit of energy, like Alzheimer's or heart attacks, you are lacking energy within that organ because there's lack of blood flow in it, and there's lack of either lack of blood flow or lack of efficiency in using glucose because there's insulin resistance. That's where ketone comes in and provide the energy and meet that gap to compensate the gap of energy deficit. And then, yeah, go ahead. No, I can continue after. The third was muscle, right, Scott? You asked.
Yeah.
So the muscle, essentially. So I talked about the glycogen sparing effect. That's one. And then the second effect, I would say, would be the recovery. So there is one study by Peter Haspel, based in Belgium. We're actually running a study with them using Ketone IQ to look at effect on EPO. So that'll be very interesting for you guys. EPO and oxygen delivery and adaptation. That will be a really great study. But on the recovery, Peter Haspel's group has shown that 3 weeks of using ketones as a recovery strategy on top of proteins and carbs, half an hour after workout and half an hour before bed, they saw an increase in 15% of work output after 3 weeks. So that's huge, right? So I think that really helps with the recovery. And anecdotally, we also have athletes who reported that they saw an improvement in recovery score in general on their Whoop or Aura Ring, and recovery in terms of less soreness following an intense workout the following day. So I hope that answers.
It does. I have a quick question, though. As you're talking about that, I'm thinking, you mentioned before sleep.
Yeah.
And I think that this is an important distinction to make. Yeah. If you have carbs right before sleep, let's say, especially like sugary stuff right before you sleep, it's gonna keep you awake. Yeah. It's gonna get you you're gonna have that sugar spike, that glycogen spike in your blood. Do you get the same thing with a ketone shot, a little bit of Ketone IQ?
So this is a very interesting point. Some people, they do, but my go-to protocol to take it is take it right before bed. So not take it an hour before. If you take it an hour before, yes, you might have that, like, your brain is still active mode, but you take it right before bed. Usually I'll go straight into bed, and you might have vivid dreams. But
nice.
That's some those are some reports. But generally you don't get that awake time. They've got, like, maybe out of 10, there are like 3 people who reported they can't sleep on Ketone IQ. And then the 7 was like got improved sleep. So we are trying to run a sleep study specifically to look at effect of Ketone IQ on sleep. What we do know is that people who have trouble sleeping, like sleep apnea in diabetes, ketones helped them sleep better, or them breathe better.
Why do you take it right before you go to sleep? What is the benefit that you see of taking it right before sleep? You'd think that you wouldn't want your mind to be, super active at that time.
So because ketone is not a stimulant, it does not, quote unquote, like, get your mind like caffeine would. It will not keep you awake. So I take it because it does improve my sleep quality. I fall into deeper sleep. I can feel the difference. And 2, because I work out as well, so it does help with my recovery. And and being a research lead of hvmn, I kind of get the perks of getting Ketone IQ. So that helps.
Hey, earlier you mentioned people with different diseases, and Alzheimer's was one of them. Have you seen any research or seen just anecdotal reports about people that have witnessed improvement for patients or loved ones taking ketones?
We've got a lot of cases. We've got a lot of customers who came back and emailed us, is that, hey, like, we're dealing with Alzheimer's, like, after taking your product, we've seen improvement. But don't take my word for it. go and search. They have a lot of studies that use MCT that improve MCT to induce ketogenesis, and then that improve symptoms of Alzheimer's. And currently, NIH is also running a big clinical trial using exogenous ketones to treat dementia and Alzheimer's.
Well, I think that's a responsible answer, and one that people can listen to, and then use that to go out and research and find their own answers. And one nice thing is, well, it can't hurt, and it gives some help and some hope, and that's important.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, Latt, before we finish, you have your own podcast called the hvmn Health Via Modern Nutrition Podcast. Tell us a little bit about that. If somebody tunes in, what are they going to learn from your guests on that podcast?
That's where I nerd out with all the clinicians and scientists and talk about metabolism and talk about hypothesis and talk about what further research we could do in order to figure out how different things can affect metabolism, not just ketones. We talk about everything from endurance exercise to anaerobic exercise to different diseases to how to treat Hashimoto's and what are the different ways of naturopathic doctors versus medical doctors. And then there are a few episodes we also talk about life philosophies, meditation, just general well-being is how to achieve optimal health in this day and age without getting bombarded with overwhelming information on social media of contradictory facts. Because one person would say, do not eat meat. The other person is like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. I only eat like meat and I cured my autoimmune disease.
Right. You also mentioned, Dr. Mansor, a lot of research and that hvmn is doing. Is there a repository where we can do some more research, or how can we find out more about hvmn or this Ketone IQ exogenous ketone?
The best source is probably the website, hvmn.com, and you can find a lot of the claims. They have like citations on there from the papers that are published. We've got our some review papers that publish as well. I believe they're on there. At the moment, the studies that we are currently discussing, they're not public yet because we haven't finalized the contracts and all of that, but we are looking into a very exciting 2024 with regards to research, especially with performance and sleep deprivation, as well as appetite suppression.
Yeah.
And not to be confused with, your 5-hour energy drinks. They're completely different. They come in a similar size container, but that's the only thing they have in common, because they act completely differently. They have different pathways to reach their goals. And I'll say that I have used it today. Keep it in my cabinet, and am a subscriber through Amazon, purchasing it because I just believe in it and it works. They sent us some in the beginning, and I ran out, and I had to go out and order some more because it works. It's effective, and I'd love to share that message with people because I believe in it.
And the caveat is that it does not. I mean, we're still working on the flavor. Let's put it that way. We're still working on the flavor. I mean, that's the perk of me being a scientist and being the research lead. I don't need to like direct sell, right? I'm here to educate people. I'm here to spread the information and the right facts around the different studies. And I always love to be very transparent with people. It's not a can of Coke. You just shot it. Do not sip it. But the effect is so good that we're doing so well that it has to be working, because nobody in their right mind would drink that if they don't get the benefits out of it.
You're exactly right. And now I associate that wonderful flavor with great outcomes, because it is effective. So I associate that wonderful taste with some good results.
But hey, 2024, good flavor coming.
Really?
We're working on it.
Nice. Hey, Dr. Latt, give us a little bit of background. How in transparency, you work for this company that makes exogenous ketones, Ketone IQ. The company's name is hvmn. How did you get involved with them, and what is your role with the company now besides making awesome content on your podcast?
You know what's funny is that people know me for content and podcast now, but I've only been doing this a little bit more than a year. I only took over the podcast October 2022, and then started doing content around that then. So initially in 2019, I joined the company because I got introduced to the company via the previous research lead, Dr. Brianna Stubbs, who is a friend, and she also graduated from the same lab within Oxford University. So we connected, and she was like, "Oh, they're hiring. Do you want to? Are you interested?" I was still in Malaysia then, so I was not even in the US, and they flew me out for an interview for a week, put me out for a week, and then offered me a job at the end of the week. So I flew here, I moved here. They paid for visa and everything in August 2019. The main role that I was hired for as a research lead was to oversee the $6 million contract we have with SOCOM, Special Command and Defense, Department of Defense. And I was the principal investigator for that project over the past 4.5 years. And my other role would include any collaboration and oversee all the science behind the products, whether it's collaboration with universities, clinicians, or scientists. Like, I'll be the go-to person as well as the subject matter expert. But then I'm also responsible to pass the messaging on the website, on the claims. Like, they need to ask me. I need to find out, like, if they're claiming this can revive people. Like, I need to be able to say yes or no, or if this can improve performance, in what sense. I need to make sure the wording is right, that it's fully reflective and transparent of the current literature and study.
It's great that a medical scientific mind like yours is the one that is validating the claims on the website versus just a marketing person or a salesperson.
Yeah,
it's good that they're saying, "Hey, we want to make this claim, Dr. Mansor. Is it true? Can we make this claim?" And you either give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It really tells me a lot about the company that they have somebody like you on staff that can support and substantiate and prove that the claims are actually true.
And it's not a hard thing to prove either. You literally just go online and just, given that if you have the skills set to search and read through all the literature, like, it's easy to disprove something or prove something. It's just that sometimes companies are so focused on profit that they can't be asked to do that. They're like, well, whatever, nobody's going to look at it, or like nobody's going to care. But ultimately, it will come and bite you in the ass, because people, competition is getting greater and greater. People just want products that work, and people just are more careful in spending their money. Like, I think throughout pandemic, everyone learned their lesson. Is like, hey, shit could go down south very, very quickly. Let's make sure we know what we're spending our money on, what we're spending our health on. How are we improving our health, and making sure, like, if we're taking supplements, we need to know the facts.
Well, that sets my question up very well. We've had a chance to, over this last hour, to get to know you and recognize you as an honest distributor of information. So I think listeners too trust your word here. And when I went on initially to resupply my Ketone IQ, I saw a lot of other ads, other things that were cheaper, that had, it was a better spend for my dollar, it looked like. But I didn't want to go that direction, because I had proven effectiveness with this wonderful tasting Ketone IQ. So I wanted to go back there. Since we trust you, why would we want to spend a bit extra on yours and not, somebody else that's selling it for cheaper? And I don't want this to be confused with a infomercial advertisement. It's not about that. It's us asking you honestly, hey, should I be wary of some of the stuff's cheaper? Am I getting something that's not the same quality product?
So I would look at the active ingredient. A lot of people now, especially like ketone salts, because ketone salts have been proven again and again in studies that it didn't work. So they start to change the messaging. If you notice, a lot of ketone salts have been changing how they message what their product is. Instead of saying salt, now they just say pure ketones. They say pure ketones. So if you look at the active ingredient, if it's BHB with like magnesium or sodium or potassium, those are ketone salts. So those are generally cheaper than butanediol or ketone esters. And then ketone esters are way more expensive as well. So those we sit right in the middle. So that's one thing to look out for, the active ingredient. And two is that I would say it's your money. Spend however you want. Go and buy the cheaper one. Try it for yourself. If it works for you, I'll be happy for you. Like, it just shows that our product is not good enough. That means we have to innovate and we have to optimize, right? But if you try it and it's not as good as our product, that means we're doing a good job. So either way, I would say we as a company would learn from this as a lesson.
Again, it comes back to that experiment of one that Don's preached about over the 12 years we've been doing this podcast. Try it and see if it works. And as Don and I have been playing around with it, we're drinking it, we're ordering it. It seems to be providing a positive influence for us. So if you think it might be a good supplement in your current nutrition and training plan, give it a try. What do you got to lose?
And Scott, I think people, if listeners go back in time, they could pick out the day that we started using Ketone IQ. It shows up clearly in the quality of our content. That's right.
Before and after.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Hey, Dr. Latt, thank you so much for joining us and helping us understand. There's a lot of talk out there, and as we all know, you see a lot of messages on social media or whatever, and some of it's good, some of it's bad, and you need to be able to cut through the crap to really find out what works, what doesn't work, what's true, what's not true. And you've helped us understand this whole process of metabolism and metabolic flexibility and the different types of fuel, when and how much to use, and how it can help us. So thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. No, thank you very much for having me and all the difficult questions. I think you've done your homework for sure, and as I would expect. And you guys have been established yourself as one of the top podcasts. That's why we wanted to work with you guys since last year. And I hope this helps your audience as well. And let's all strive for better, more transparent science and help everyone improve their health.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Doctor. We appreciate it. And as we end all podcasts, Scott, go out and run. Mas. All right.